They that have power to hurt and will do none, that do not do the thing they most do show, who, moving others, are themselves a stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow, they rightly do inherit heaven's graces, and husband nature's riches from expense. They are the lords and owners of their faces, others but stewards of their excellence. The summer's flower is to the summer sweet, though to itself it only live and die. But if that flower with base infection meet, the basest weed outbraves his dignity, for sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds. Lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds. Any discussion of environmental justice should celebrate the weed. Weeds sustain the cultures of the oppressed, verdant footprints of colonial neglect lining our walkways and cracking through concrete. Native weeds challenge violently pristine grass lawns, and invasive weeds are demonized for overwhelming native ecosystems. Yet these physical manifestations of human oversight can often feed us and alleviate our illnesses. Weeds might have been introduced by well-intended immigrants who sought a familiar presence, or planted as short-sighted solutions to land management issues, or they might have evolved over millions of years to fit a specific niche in the ecosystem before humans got involved. We practice our control over a limited perception of natural beauty, like elevating the flowering lily of Sonnet 94, blooming from a single bulb for a few flourishing weeks. On far greater timescales, networks of weeds exhibit an adaptation and resilience we should learn to emulate if we have any chance at altering our role in the climate catastrophe. Hi everyone, I'm excited to be sending these words from the tail end of summer here in Ithaca, New York, to your ears that are whirling ahead of me around the globe. My name is Adam Shulman. I'm an eco-scenographic designer, an environmental sculptor, and very seasonally an actor. My land art incorporates forms of plant stewardship that respond to my surroundings. I try to address the circumstances of human-induced degradation and neglect by treating unwanted plant growth as a sculptural medium. Weeds, both invasive and native, are abundant resources, often exhibiting notable structural, cultural, and medicinal qualities. I thin, uproot, and rearranged imbalanced growth to create platforms for performances, gatherings, and personal meditation. The goal of this non-extractive practice of caretaking and creation is ecological transformation, a very literal activism that I've been able to incorporate in productions of Shakespearean theater. As just one person making physical change to my surroundings, my efforts complement the timeline, scale, and influence of a typical theatrical production, beginning with independent research, strongly affecting those kind enough to perform the weeks of uprooting and gathering and planting with me, briefly influencing an audience when it's presented, and then the creators move on to the next project and the land resumes its growth. While I hope to enact continuous land stewardship efforts on greater social scales, for now my projects are like sonnets, brief clusters of energetic intention with lessons to be gleaned for those who sit with them. Organic design materials are redistributed to the earth, brush piles provide habitats for animals, and other traces remain to be overgrown again. Realistically, performing land stewardship implies more sustained effort than a fleeting theatrical production. Ecological transformation demands persistent action. Speaking to my presence here in the U.S. as participants in a colonial legacy, we should turn to the cultures that developed along the landscape over thousands of years. Indigenous traditions often sustain intimate ties to place by forming cultural practices around the biodiversity of their regions. When determining the materials of an installation or set design, emulating vernacular forms of architecture derived directly from the landscape can reveal practical, low-waste methods of world building. If we educate ourselves to how elder societies integrated and depended on plants in daily life, we might be able to better adapt to our transformed world. While it's easy to make general acknowledgments about indigeneity, choosing to respond to a cultural presence demands more specific action in the direction of living peoples, our neighbors and predecessors. Even small arts organizations can seek out surviving groups, leading to the redistribution of monetary and physical resources as part of greater land-back efforts. So frequently, our approaches to reading the landscape don't give credit to unintended, often invasive plant species. If weeds must be removed, they should be identified and named, their legacies examined, and their qualities incorporated into our ways of living. Elements of the natural world will be affected by our work long after a performance for humans. Can we treat plants and animals and microbes and even stars as our audience? Instead of being like a gardener placing new life in the absence of torn-up weeds, Can we learn to adapt to the plants that have made their home with us? Can we shift from an eradication state of mind to a cooperative understanding with these living beings? Sonnet 116 describes the love between two minds. Can we change our minds to be closer to the way that weeds think? Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. My work outdoors has developed alongside my experiences in eco-Shakespeare. It's honestly a little surreal finding myself a part of this international web of scholars after being introduced to your work in 2021 by my close mentor at Cornell University, Theo Black. In about 11 hours, Theo will present in full on the BIOphelia project, so I'll only speak briefly to the process of my design as a little sneak peek. We focused on Ophelia's weeds, including the fantastic garlands of crowflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples or violets that she wore at her death. These flowers were among many mentioned in the text of Hamlet that had been processed as medicine by self-educated women in Elizabethan England. With potted flowers mentioned by Ophelia, we shaped a garden of beautiful weeds to create an image of the brook in which she drowned under a willow tree, similar to this willow tree. I harvested Japanese knotweed, oriental bittersweet, European privet, and just a whole international community of invasive species from a stream nearby the theater here in Ithaca. Creating a world of self-care through overlooked weeds was a step toward justice for Ophelia's reputation. I hope you tune in to Theo's talk to learn more about BIOphelia, which has become the catalyst for our upcoming eco-Shakespearean collaborations. I'll mention one final recent project presented extensively in the book Performing Shakespeare on an Endangered Planet by the extraordinary Katie Brokaw and Elizabeth Freestone. I had the life-changing pleasure of acting in and designing and constructing the set for last year's Shakespeare in Yosemite production of A Midsummer Yosemite Stream. Our adaptation entered the fairy world through a portal in a giant sequoia trunk fire scar constructed from recycled boxes and garden fencing. This was the backdrop for our response to the human transformation of the Pacific Northwest, and specifically in Yosemite. Over the last 2 centuries, the U.S. government and landowners have suppressed natural wildfires. Consistent low-intensity fire promotes the sequoias, redwoods, chaparral, and wildflower species of the region by hardening tree trunks, opening dormant seeds for germination, and reducing overgrown brush that competes for sunlight. Controlled burns were practiced annually by Native Americans before their genocidal erasure. Unless humans carefully burn younger flammable growth, hardy species like sequoias are much more likely to be overwhelmed by the extreme intensity of violent wildfires. In this case, weeds must be thinned for a greater good. The entire ecosystem is threatened by the settlers' negligence to the needs of the land. Would we have such uncontrollable wildfires today if they had been more willing to take the perspectives of the plants? When I heard of this climate justice symposium, I was reading the sonnets. So many of these verses are bittersweet lessons in the complexities of care. Despite anthropocentric and gendered framings of nature's beauty, Shakespeare consistently addresses the existential realities of ecological change. It's natural to love, to think of aging and reproduction, to recognize darkness and decay as part of tender new growth. If these verses are a paradigm of human love, what lessons can we learn to love our altered globe? When I consider everything that grows, holds in perfection but a little moment, that this huge stage presenteth not, but shows whereon the stars in secret influence comment, when I perceive that men as plants increase, cheered and checked even by the selfsame sky, vaunt in their youthful sap, at height decrease, and wear their brave state out of memory, then the conceit of this inconstant stay sets you most rich in youth before my sight, where wasteful time debateth with decay to change your day of youth to sullied night, and all in war with time for love of you. As he takes from you, I engraft you anew.